Good morning, Breakfast with Bacon fans. I have a phenomenal guest today. He has been on my show before, Father Paul Sullins. He is an authority on the issues that are devastating society today. Father Paul Sullins is a research professor at Catholic University. And I'm going to tell you about what he does. I'm going to mess this part up, research associate at the Ruth Institute. Got that. And I'll let him tell you what he studies there. But before we do, and just so you don't get confused as we're talking, he is also a married priest. How does that happen? He was an Episcopalian priest who did convert. So he is the father of two wonderful children and still the husband of a wonderful wife. So he gets it from various directions. He understands the Catholic Church, the priesthood, family life, but then again, his charism is this research, and he is bringing to the fore the truths about these things that are happening in society today. And the biggest reason that I brought him on was because of what we've learned recently with the Pope's fiducia supplicans, which started so much conversation about unions that should we bless them? Should we now? Should we not? But my questions are more in the direction of, okay. And Father, see, I'm talking a lot before I let you say more about what you do.
No problem.
You have not only done some powerful research that has been said to be the mother lode of research because of the depth of it, and on thing in addition to your own research, you have also collected all the other research that you can about same-sex attraction, the problems associated with it, conversion therapy, donor-conceived people, surrogacy, and you have just these secular research, as well as the research you've done yourself, which again, people would possibly say maybe that's not secular research because you're Catholic, though I would argue with them. And today we're going to talk about not only some of those findings, but really the passion today is these attacks on what they call conversion therapy. So before I say anything else, welcome and fill in any blanks that I may have missed. Specifically, what are you doing at the Ruth Institute? Because that's where I met you.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be with you, Christine. In the past 2 years, I have done a lot of research on persons with same-sex attraction who don't want to live the so-called LGBT lifestyle. In other words, to
Right.
be in a relationship with someone of the same sex that looks like a marriage in some ways, and to kind of be happy with having type sex. Um, and it, Persons who want to change that have trouble nowadays because the therapy to help them is being banned. And they're being told that that's not possible and that that'll cause them great harm. And so I've been looking into those questions and the research on those questions for the past couple of years. I also look at other things, children with same-sex parents, the natural family. Right now, I'm doing a couple of studies on abortion, which is a rising issue. All of these issues are tied together by being related to the disposition of the body, the sexual revolution, as it's called, which has put forth a series of falsehoods about sexual relationships that are harmful in a number of ways to both men and women. And so all of that harm rests upon research that is often false, deceptive, misleading, and will lead people astray. I try to look at the same data, the same evidence as people who think of it in other ways, and I publish sometimes findings that are very different. Now, what's gotten me most into the debate over changing same-sex attraction is a study that I did last year, which refuted a study that was done in 2020 by a man named John Blosnick. He published it with another scholar named Elon Meyer. Elon Meyer is the founder of a theory called minority stress theory, which tells us that if persons have minority sexual orientation, the apparent psychological difficulties that they have are not due to psychological troubles, they're due to ongoing discrimination in society. So we've known for a long time, and it's still true today, that persons who have minority sexual orientation, so this would be people who have sex only or also with persons of the same sex, so they might call themselves homosexual or bisexual. Such persons have far higher rates of morbidities, psychological morbidities, than the general population. They're about 4 times more likely to attempt suicide, about 3 times more likely to suffer depression, and substance abuse, much higher rates across the board, and just about any psychological difficulty that you can think of. It's higher in this population than in the general population of persons. So, the 1 to 2% of who have a minority sexual orientation have much higher rates of these things than the 98% of persons who are heterosexual. The minority stress theory says that those higher rates are not due to the fact that there are internal psychological difficulties with these people, but that they face much higher rates of discrimination and stigma than the regular population. There is absolutely no evidence for this theory. The attempt to show evidence points to the association between experiencing greater stigma and reporting higher rates of all of these psychological troubles. All of that evidence is based on self-reports. So they will ask someone with minority sexual orientation, do you suffer higher discrimination? And they'll say, yes, I do. And do you have higher rates of these difficulties? They say, yes, I do. And they say, see, the one causes the other. But no study has ever actually shown a cause between the two. Studies that measure stigma or discrimination objectively, in other words, not by you telling me whether you've been discriminated against, but by criminal reports or victimization reports, or talking to teachers about students, or talking to other people about the person in question. Those kind of studies have found that these people do not suffer higher rates of discrimination or stigma. I did a study myself looking at children of same-sex parents and found that they don't suffer higher rates of bullying in school or discrimination than any other group of children, but their parents think that they do. So the research has now moved from studying discrimination and apparent psychotrauma to perceived discrimination and apparent psychotrauma. And in fact, now it's moved to calling it internalized homophobia, so that somehow experiencing stigma and discrimination becomes self-discrimination or homophobia. And so, the research has actually moved back in the direction of a psychological difficulty. If I have internalized homophobia, that sounds a lot like something internal in me that's causing the trouble.
Right.
The question is that related to actual homophobia? And those are the things that have not been, they've not been able to prove. Now, the way I got into this was the study by Blosnick and Meyer was of persons who had been through sexual orientation change efforts. It's an acronym, SOCE, and it's a basket term for any attempt to change someone's sexual orientation. And there are a variety of ways that this might happen, sometimes in religious settings, sometimes in secular therapeutic settings. It could be going to traditional psychotherapy. It could be camp type interventions. It could be a range of other kinds of experiences. They lump those all together and they look at the effect of those in this particular study. They use wonderful data that is a, a high quality random sample of persons who identify as lesbian, gay, or bisexual. So it's an LGBT population. They ask them, have you ever been to SOCI? And then they ask about whether they have ever thought about committing suicide or attempted suicide. And they find a correlation between having gone to SOCI and attempting suicide or thinking about suicide. So it appears to prove their point that persons who undergo SOCI come out more suicidal. The problem is when I looked at the data, they neglected to do a very basic thing that's done in any of these studies. When you study someone's difficulties, you have to separate the morbidity that they had before they went through the experience with that after the experience. If I say, well, Christine went to the beach and she is far more excitable than the ordinary person. So going to the beach must have made her excitable. You might say, well, you know what? I was excitable before I ever went to the beach. It has nothing to do with going to the beach. And that's what I found in this study of SOCI. I found that most of this suicidality that persons expressed, they expressed before they went to the SOCI. In fact, after they went to the SOCI, their level of suicidality was much lower than other similar sexual minority persons who had never been to SOCI. And so what they did, which is deceptive, is to look at lifetime suicidality and treat it as if it was all caused by going to SOCI. So when I made that correction, it reversed the findings. I found that SOCI did not cause persons to be suicidal. What happened was people who were suicidal were much more likely to go to therapy, to get help probably for that. And it was pretty effective. And so it helped persons. So if you go to the website of the Ruth Institute, ruthinstitute.org today, they have a great resource page on this. And at the top of the resource page, it has a picture of a person who is liberated from suicidality because they've been able to go through this therapy. It's the exact opposite of what they're telling you. Now, the reason that the gay advocates and those into this ideology don't want persons to go to SOCI and to get this therapy is because they believe that it's not possible to change sexual orientation. They will tell you that persons are born that way, that it's immutable, that it can't be changed. And if you try to change it, you're asking someone to deny who they are. And that is psychologically harmful to them. So there's a whole basket of assumptions that are being made. All of them are false. The scientific evidence has definitively shown them to be false. We had two of the best studies of genetic innate markers for sexual orientation that came out. One was a summary of all the twin studies that have ever been done on the topic. This was by Polderman and their group in 2016. They concluded that sexual orientation was not innately determined, but it was innately influenced. So there's a genetic influence, but not determination. And about 32% of sexual orientation from their consensus finding of the twin studies was due to genetic influences. The remainder was due to environmental influences. They call them what? Yeah, it's
For
nature.
instance, because I heard 87% of lesbians had suffered daddy wounds. So that's the nurture part.
Right.
Before you go further, then may I ask what kind of nature elements did they find? If there's no gay gene, for instance, what kind of nature genetic things can play on the choice or the struggles to, that it's not a decision to be same-sex attracted, but the
Right.
outcome of being same-sex attracted.
Right, you're talking about the
Well, you
nurture
just said,
influences of the
well, you
nature.
just said that it's about 32%
Right.
is basically, you're not born that way, but there is some nature.
There is some influence.
Well, what
Right.
does that mean? Can you clarify that?
Sure. Let me just say now, a further study confirmed Polderman's findings. This was by Ghana and a big team, about 40 different researchers in 2019. And they did a new technique where they actually went and looked at the genomes of persons with same-sex attraction. It's called a genome-wide association study. And now that we've mapped the human genome, you can actually do that. You get a database of all the genetic markers that make up an individual and see how those are related to their traits. And the result of that entirely separate method came to almost the exact same conclusion. They found that the genetic propensity, they call it heritability, of same-sex attraction was, wait for it, 32%. Exactly the same as the twin studies. So we have very solid evidence that's been definitively confirmed that about a third of the propensity to have same-sex attraction can be related to someone's genetic orientation, and about 2/3 to the things they've experienced in their family and in their environment. Now, what are the things that make up the 32%?
Yeah, I'm
The
very curious.
largest association was a propensity for taking risk. So persons with same-sex attraction are much more likely to be risk takers and to engage in risky behaviors. So that would explain the higher rates of substance abuse, and also intimate partner violence, which is very high among same-sex partners, and multiple sex partners.
Yeah, not afraid of the diseases, not afraid of, yeah.
Exactly. And then you could think of a natural segue to experimenting with same-sex partners as a kind of a risky behavior. And so there is mostly that. But exactly what genetic markers or um, um, configurations of the genes that go into same-sex attraction is not something we can tell, because they found that same-sex attraction, persons with same-sex attraction, uh, the genetic parts that were related to that were mostly polygenetic, which means there's no single structure or marker, but it seems to be just a general um, influence that's spread throughout the genome. And that's true with just about any trait that's similar to that. So 32% genetically influenced is about the same as someone's political orientation
Yeah.
or their religious affiliation. So someone who has grown up in a particular religion, what are the odds that
But their
their
kids will
relatives
have that. Yeah.
same? Yeah, it turns out it's about the same. It's about
Yeah.
32% heritability of religious affiliation. And there are a lot of what we think of as social patterns
Yeah.
that have that level of genetic inheritance. Now, we
So
don't know.
can I stop you? Because I just want to make sure people hear. So when you hear studies like the Human Genome Project or things that say there is no genetic, there's no gene for same-sex attraction. And you're like, oh, well, 32% come from nature. I just want to make sure people don't confuse the two and think, well,
Right,
see, it is in your genes. No, the genes are for things like risk taking, which
right,
heterosexuals do as well. Risk taking doesn't make you gay or straight. Or as you were saying, the
right.
other behaviors. Well, none of those behaviors make you gay or straight. It's just people with those behaviors more freely choose types of lifestyles. I do the Myers-Briggs,
Yeah,
personality indicator. Love that tool. It's a
right,
tool.
right.
And The people who type out into one temperament, the NTs, are natural born leaders. The vast majority of them are firstborns. We see correlations. We see how they like to interact in a workplace. Some are NFs, intuitive feelers, and the vast majority of NFs are conflict avoidant, and so on and so forth. So it just says, people who have the temperament SPs, sensing perceivers, 50% of high school dropouts are SPs. Well, does that mean that if you're an SP, you're going to drop out of school? No, it just means that the way that you think causes you to go in the
Right.
direction. Yeah, so that's a very important distinction, because when
So
you
it
first
is,
said it, I wanted to make sure to clarify.
and it is related to personality. Research on LGBT persons have found that they tend to be high in neuroticism. And so there is a sort of a personality overlay in this.
Mhm.
Um, so if I have a certain personality type or a propensity for something, it doesn't mean that it's determined or that I must turn out that way. I might be
Right.
somewhat more inclined. Now, we were just talking about religious affiliation, for example. I know people who say I was born Baptist, right? Or they say I was a cradle Catholic,
Mm-hmm.
uh, meaning that it's in their family. And if we did a genetic study, we would find an apparent genetic link. But I don't think many people think that there's actually a Catholic gene or a Baptist gene that makes the
Right.
difference there.
It's called the
Um,
Eucharist. It
yeah,
connects us all.
that's it. That's these are social arrangements that get kind of baked into a person,
Yeah.
and they can be harder to change than not, but people can do that. People can convert. I'm an example of that. And people can make free choices about that. I don't think anyone is um, coerced uh, to be one particular religion
Right.
or another.
But
There are a
what's
lot of,
funny too, Father, is the societal hand is so much stronger than people realize. On my podcast, I've had many
right,
people who
right.
have left the gay lifestyle. And I think of Reverend Charlene Cothran said, I always knew I wasn't gay. I wouldn't admit it until later. And but all of them, when you say when you think about your childhood, when you think about learning you were gay, or whatever, tell us. I think of one man who said, well, I was just always much more tender, and
Mhm.
I like the artsy things. And I had a dad who was a strong masculine figure, and he didn't like that and wanted me to play football. So they talk about how their dad's desires to influence them, was one thing, but then here's the thing. Society says, oh, you like pink? You must be gay. You
Right.
should date people. Oh, you like to dance and you're a male. You really are probably gay. And so more of them I hear say, Father, are that, well, I didn't think so, but because of these other constraints, I was led to believe I had to go together. And one more thing, I think of a young man when my daughters were young. He was 9 years old. He loved wearing the pink bodysuits and playing with the dolls. He used to come over with my daughter, and very, very feminine young boy. And all of us were like, he's gonna, and he did in fact grow up to, with same-sex attraction.
Oh,
And so my daughters will say, don't tell me that he wasn't born that way. He was so young. And I said, he
mhm.
was young. He liked pink. He liked playing with dolls. But then where is the attachment to saying, therefore, you must also sleep with boys because girls
Right.
sleep with boys? And that's where some people just don't get it. I'm saying, no, you can be feminine. You can like dolls. You can like dancing and pink and still be a man. And I think that's the part that our society is missing
Yeah.
is, oh, we want men who are empathetic, but when they are, oh, you must be gay.
Yeah.
You
Right.
know? Sorry. All right. Sorry. Okay. So we could probably go on, but you've got
That's
this
right.
passion now for what.
These things are socialized into us very early, and it's true that someone who at age 13 or 14 wakes up and says, "You know what? I'm attracted to guys more than I'm attracted to girls." And we're talking about a male now. By the way, most of the research that looks at same-sex attraction looks at men. It's very different between men and women. Women are much more changeable, and they have less genetic influence than men do on their sexual orientation. But just talking about men, and the belief that men cannot change their sexual orientation, that they wake up and they say, "Oh, I discovered that I'm gay. It must be who I am.
Right.
It must be in me from birth." But there are a lot of things that feel like they're in us from birth that really aren't. One of the best examples I like is the example of the language that we speak. So you and I speak English. It probably was we call it our mother tongue, right?
Hmm.
That we learned it when we were so young that we found ourselves speaking English before we knew what it was,
What
that there
conscious
were
thought is, yeah.
different languages in the world. If you ask somebody, well, when did you make a decision to speak English? They look at you like you're nuts. I didn't make a decision. It's not chosen. We say, well, there must be a gene in you that determines that you must speak English. You can't speak any other language. Well, no, that's silly. We're not determined genetically to speak the English language. It's part of our social environment that we grow up in. And it started so early that it feels like it's just natural and built into us. Um, but it's not. And so there are lots of parts of our identity that are like that. I think that for many people, this same-sex attraction, like you've described, starts with early socialization experiences um, and feels like kind of that it's built in. But even our language could be changed if we were forced to, in some environment, to learn another language. Well, we could do it. It would take work
Right.
and effort, and not everyone would succeed at it necessarily, but it can be changed. Now, most people who have same-sex attraction do change in the direction of heterosexual attraction, is one truth that's not recognized. So we talked about one myth. One myth is people are born that way and can't change. That's not true. And one of the things that shows that's not true is that if you look at a population data, as I've done in several studies, where they measure someone's sexual orientation at one point in time, and then they measure it again at a later point in time. There have been about 5 good studies that have done this on a population level in the United States. They find that not only can people change sexual orientation, but that most people do change their sexual orientation. About 2/3 of people eventually change, and most of those who change from a more homosexual activity or orientation to
The
a more
norm.
heterosexual
Mhm.
orientation. And this is so well known that it's been confirmed by committed lesbian LGBT advocate scholars in several studies. I just finished a study of the British population using great data. It's the National Survey of Sexual Attitudes and Lifestyles, which the UK government does every 10 years. And in the 2010 version, they asked persons uh, who their sexual partners were today. Then they asked them who their sexual partners were 5 years ago. And by comparing those two, we discovered that the majority of those who 5 years ago said that they had sex with persons of the same sex today don't. They have
Say that.
they don't they only have sex with persons of the opposite
Opposite
sex.
sex.
And so you have most people who do change. Now, not most of these people who change spontaneously in some form or another. Um, but some of them availed themselves of therapy and therapeutic support. There have been about 5 good studies of persons who undergo therapy uh, for sexual orientation. All of those studies have found that most people who undergo that therapy can change somewhat. So if we're talking about sexual orientation, we measure it in terms of 3 dimensions. You may know this. Um, the dimensions are attraction, who you want to have sex with in terms of whether it's male or female. Um, and then there's behavior, who you actually do have sex with in terms of male or female. And then the third is your identification. What do you call yourself? Do you call yourself homosexual, bisexual, um, heterosexual or none of the above. Increasingly, young people are choosing none of the above. The most common sexual orientation among persons under the age of 20 in the United States today is a category called mostly heterosexual. And so they're saying, well, I mostly have heterosexual partners, but I'm open to maybe something other than that. So there's a wide range and kind of a mix of the ways that people relate across those categories. So if you take those three dimensions, we found that on the NATSL, the one dimension of sexual behavior, people were able to change over 5 years. If you look at the minority sexual population and you ask, well, how many of all of the people who express any one of these three dimensions, how many express all three of them? And so of persons who say, I'm attracted to persons of the same sex, how many of them actually have sex with persons of the opposite sex instead of the same sex? And then how many actually identify as homosexual? What's really interesting, surprises many people, is that of all the persons who express any one of these three, the percentage that express all three dimensions concordant is about 25%. So 3/4 of people who have sex with persons of the same sex either don't call themselves homosexual or say that they're really not attracted to persons of the same sex.
Wait, hold on.
Sure.
75% of the people that have sex with the same sex, are that right? Do that again, say that again.
Okay. I don't have the exact figures for each one of the dimensions.
Ish, though.
Yeah, ish. So it's actually 26% who express all three dimensions.
26% of the people who are
who express any one of the three dimensions.
Okay.
So if you take all the people who express any one of these three dimensions and add them up, and then you say how many of those expressed all three of them. It's only 26%. So 74% of persons. And again, this is in the British population. In the US population, it's actually a little more. I think it's like 77 or 78% who are discordant. And so they only express at most two of the three dimensions of sexual
So I might be
orientation.
attracted to people of the same sex and have sex with people of the same sex, but I don't call myself gay. Or I might call myself gay,
right?
But I'm not having sex with people of the opposites of the same sex.
Right. And then, or I have sex with people of the same sex, but I'm not attracted to people of the same sex.
Right. So it's kind of more of like, this is just an action and thing I do, even though I'm not attracted to them.
Well, it means that people are very diverse and maybe creative in their sexuality.
What is the value of this then? Is this saying, does this prove the sociological element then of
it debunks the myth that if someone is attracted to persons of the same sex, that they are thereby gay
and it's unfixable.
And that they have to have sex with people of the same sex. In fact, many people do cross those boundaries all the time and are not fixed by that. The implication of this for LGBT advocates, and they've written several articles on this, is that this is primary evidence for the fact that sexual orientation cannot be innate and immutable, and therefore persons who identify as homosexual or gay cannot form a distinct social class that can be the subject of special rights and privileges under the law. So, if you say, well, we have racial preferences, or we have laws against discriminating against people according to their race, that's something we can understand, that race is a characteristic that's inborn, is with us throughout our lives, and is easily identifiable. None of those things are true for having same-sex attraction or identifying as lesbian or gay, or having sex with persons of the same sex versus the opposite sex. And so if if persons who experience these dimensions are this polyglot mix of behaviors, it means that you really don't have a definable group that will uh, uh, be the subject for special rights under the law or discrimination. You say, well, you can't discriminate against gay people. Well, does that mean gay people who are having heterosexual sex?
Right. Or
Does
people who
that
think
mean,
they're gay, or
or
don't think
people,
they're gay, but
or who were gay 10 years ago and today are not identifying as gay? So it's a transient mix of behaviors uh, on which you really can't rest too many rights. And so forms a particular problem for gay advocates. But for
but you won't
us,
hear that on the media.
no, no. I'd be happy to tell you who these studies are. The best study for this is by Diamond and Roski in 2016. It's called Scrutinizing Immutability. And you can find it on the web. It's old enough now, it's not behind a paywall. But they review the studies of the population studies of discordance and lay out all the arguments why gay advocates should not depend upon an immutability framework for gay rights. Now, they propose that it's not necessary, that you can have gay rights on other grounds. We can talk about that. But from my point of view, it underlines the ancient wisdom of the church to say that same-sex attraction is not a condition that people have. It's an inclination. Um, and it's transient. The assumption in the teaching of the Catholic Church has been that, and again, we're talking about males, um, that males who are attracted to other males are experiencing a sexual immaturity, that there is an immature phase of their psychosexual development that most people will grow beyond if they experience it. Some get stuck there. That is a Freudian psychoanalytical approach, but it is the most common approach among those who experience change or who work with those who experience change. And so men who express or experience attraction to other men frequently have a, a arrangement of parenthood in their family of origin where they have an overprotective mother and a distant father. And so if your mother is very, very close and kind of hovering and your father is out of the picture, or you experience a certain amount of rejection from your father, that's the most common recipe for the development of male sexual orientation toward males.
Right.
The best book on this would be actually, it's called A Parent's Guide to Preventing Homosexuality by Joseph Nicolosi. And you can get it. I think it's probably banned on Amazon, but you could buy it on Books A Million, which doesn't ban books nearly as much as Amazon does. Or you can just look it on the web, and you can buy it from a private source that will sell it to you from the website that's devoted to Joseph Nicolosi and his work. But there are other works that are very similar. Richard Cohen is an author that's put out a number of similar works.
I'll try to put some links in this show. If
Yeah,
Father will
sure,
get them to me, I'll put them in the show notes and you guys can link right to them.
right.
Father, let me keep you just for the sake of time.
Mhm.
You said you're very passionate then about what the world calls, and I don't even know if I should say it out loud because of this channel that we're on and the censorship, but people
Uh-huh.
who are actively seeking to become more attracted to the opposite sex as
Right,
opposed to, so
right,
there's a certain therapy that the liberal elites are trying to tell us is bad. You're trying to hurt people. And can you
right.
talk about that then? I mean,
Yeah, sure.
you've already alluded to it and I get it. And
Right.
I recognize that you're leading us down that direction, but why are you
Yeah.
passionate about that then right now?
Well, because people can change, and it's can be life uh,
Life
illuminating,
saving. Yeah. Altering.
liberating for them to change, and it's certainly not harmful. generally speaking. I mean, anything can be harmful to certain individuals, but on the average, it's not harmful. So there used to be, maybe 30, 40 years ago, a tendency among therapists to use techniques that they don't use today, such as aversive techniques. Or we were talking earlier before the show about electroshock therapy. And you mentioned lobotomies. Well, those are discredited therapeutic practices that are not done anymore. And some of those practices were used to help people with unwanted homosexuality. That doesn't happen today, but persons who do help persons today with unwanted homosexuality are often accused of using these techniques as an attempt to ban such therapy.
Right.
What happens today is persons who engage in therapy to help persons with unwanted same-sex attractions will use talk therapy techniques. Sometimes they'll use EMDR. Most of the time, not even that. It's a cognitive behavioral type of therapy. Persons who seek to change their sexual orientation almost always do so for one of two reasons. One, they're very religious and they have religious commitments that make homosexual relationships problematic. It's for us Catholics, it would be sinful.
Right.
If I had those attractions, I would want to either
Act
change
on
them
them.
or be able to deny practicing them so as to live a life of
Chastity.
chastity. The other reason is that they've met someone of the opposite sex or they're in a relationship, a marriage with someone of the opposite sex that they want to make work, that's life-giving to them. And so persons with those motivations often are able either to change their sexual attractions to the point where they're able to function in those relationships, or to, despite having attractions to persons of the same sex, generally are able to manage them to the point where they're able to be successful in those settings. So I mentioned earlier that there were 5 or so studies of persons who had changed sexual orientation. Now, if we talk about changing just one of the 3 dimensions, about 60 to 65% of persons can do that.
Wow.
And the most common change is a change in the direction of greater heterosexual attraction and stopping
The
altogether,
action.
yeah, same-sex relations and engaging only in opposite sex relations. Um, most people can achieve something to that degree. Not a full remission, we might say, not where I was homosexual last year,
And now
um,
I'm heterosexual.
and now I'm a concordant heterosexual. That happens in 15 to 20% of the cases. In the study that I've done on this topic, it was 17% were able to achieve full heterosexual identity and function and attraction. But remember, most persons with minority sexual orientation aren't congruent on all 3 anyway.
Right.
Only 26% or so of them are. So they're moving toward heterosexuality in one of the 3 dimensions, and some of them are able to move in all 3 dimensions. So we can say that people can change sexual orientation. It's not necessarily easy. Not everyone is successful at doing that. But most people who try are successful to some degree.
Yeah.
Now, another myth is that people who are uh, attracted to persons of the same sex are therefore less attracted to persons of the opposite sex. And if you move toward attraction to people of the opposite sex, you diminish your attraction to persons of the same sex. If you've ever seen the Kinsey scale, that's exactly the premise behind this scale. It ranges from 0 to 7. And if you're a 7, you're completely homosexual. And if you're 0, you're completely heterosexual. I think that's right. It might be the other way. But the idea is that if you move toward greater heterosexuality, you're moving away from greater homosexuality. So it's a spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
We've discovered that that's really not true. The same genetic studies that I cited earlier found out that persons can have, if you measure them separately, persons can report varying levels of opposite sex attraction and varying levels of same sex attraction. And it's not necessarily more of one or less of the other. Persons can have high levels of both or low levels of both or be anywhere in between. So these function independently. It turns out that almost everyone who has some level of same sex attraction also reports some level of opposite sex attraction. So, in terms of changing sexual attractions, it's not necessarily the idea that you're reversing or denying your same-sex attraction. Is that you're choosing to live out of and operationalize your opposite sex attraction that you already have, rather than operationalizing and living out of your same-sex attraction. Most of us have both. You know, for years I studied children of same-sex parents. Um, and through about 2015, 2016, that's mostly what I did. I still do follow that up, but um, about half of the children who were living with two same-sex parents at that time were the biological child of one of the two parents. So you had a situation where someone was in a marriage or relationship, they had a child, and then they came out as gay and they left that relationship and they now are living
Like
with
my
someone
mom.
of,
So I knew my
yeah,
mom and my dad, and I lived together, and then my mom divorced, and then she lived with a
right,
woman. So I'd be the
right.
perfect one you're talking about.
That's right.
Okay.
So your mom, or anyone who has a child of that nature, by definition, must have been able to function heterosexually enough to be able to conceive and bear a child.
Right.
So that tells us that persons who say, "Well, I'm same-sex attracted," it isn't the case that they can't, or it's impossible for them to
To be
have
opposite sex attracted as
heterosexual.
well.
That's right. So most persons experience both, and that's the reality.
Right.
We're much more diverse and creative in our sexuality than the leftist ideologues would want us to think. We don't fit into these particular boxes that they try to put us into. The Lord has made us very creative. We can change, and we are called to dominate, to have mastery of our impulses by reason, so that we make choices on reason and justice, to engage in sexual relationships as the Lord has called us to do. I don't mean to say it's like an equation that we're going to love somebody, but the elements of rationality enter into our relationships with those that we want to have sex with. The purpose of sex,
To
this is something.
procreate.
Yes, it is. But the lie, of course, is that the purpose of sex is for self-fulfillment and pleasure and having a good life. Um, all of those might go into that, but the basic purpose of sex is to propagate the human race. It's to create new human life. And so whatever we do sexually, it has to accommodate that possibility. And so that leads us into the kinds of relationships where people are going to stay together for all of their lives. They're going to commit to be with those children for all of their lives. They're going to support one another in such a way that it becomes a welcoming environment for a child. So we're describing now something that looks a lot like marriage, natural, traditional marriage. And that turns out to be the most liberating way for two humans to relate to one another sexually, um, and to be able to deal with the natural product of that, which is going to be a child, a new human life. Doesn't mean every single relationship is going to produce that, but generally, by and large, that's the tendency that's going to happen. And so, healthy, happy, liberating relationships are ones that uh, are structured so that they're able to handle that possibility elegantly and in a life-giving way for everyone involved. Well, what does that mean? It means that when you conceive a child, you're not going to kill that child in the womb. It means that you're not going to have sex with persons of the same sex. It means that you're not going to get divorced after a couple of years because things are not going smoothly. Um, it means that you're committed to fundamental um, elements of justice and substance and reason that make a world that is most conducive to human happiness all the way around. Now you and I know, because we've both been blessed with long marriages, that there's nothing as deeply fulfilling and satisfying as having a life together with someone that you've that you've walked that journey with, and that you've had children with, uh, and that becomes a very meaningful part of your life. You can't experience that if you do any of the things that I've mentioned that the ideologues of the sexual revolution would tell us to do. So there's a liberation in living your sexuality in a way that encounters or engages the idea of children. Um, and that's the root difficulty, really, of all of these ideologies of the sexual revolution that want to lead us in the other direction.
Yeah, especially since they lead to things that are also problematic that we mentioned, well, I
Yep.
mentioned very earlier, surrogacy, donor conceived people,
Yeah.
and all the problems that are associated with those. I mean, whenever you go outside of the, I won't even say the religious order, but the natural order, it causes problems. There's just, so what would you say to people watching then about this? Because we're really talking about the fact that it's not permanent. If you or someone you know is in a state of um, sexual, I'm trying to think of words that aren't going to get censored, but right, homosexual, same-sex
Right,
attracted,
right, right.
what would you suggest for our viewers to do differently, um, think differently, reach out to those people in their lives? I mean, what should we do? Father, what should viewers do? I mean,
Mhm.
if this is something that they're interested for themselves, they don't like this lifestyle that they're living or are
Mhm.
attracted to, or you have a family member who is
Yeah,
struggling with this, but we have a
yeah.
society that's trying to say, oh, go with it. You're never going to change. This is the way it's supposed to be. What do you suggest based on the research, based on your own faith, your priesthood, based on all that you know?
It's a different answer if you're experiencing same-sex attraction yourself than if your friend or your family member or your child is experiencing same-sex attraction. So if it's you, if you're struggling with feelings of being attracted to persons of the same sex, um, what the message to you that is a message of life is that you don't have to live that way. You do not have to engage in a life of same-sex relationships, um, and that there is freedom for you on the other side of that. It's not necessarily easy, but you need to know um, that it is not God's best for you to live that way. That God has a better possibility in store for you. Sometimes I hear from persons who are same-sex attracted, and they say, "Just tell me the truth. Is it a sin or is it something that is okay?" Because we have both messages going out, even in the church. And I say to them, it is absolutely a sin, because they need to hear that, they need to know that with clarity.
Yes.
Um, but now, if you're talking about your friend or your loved one or your child who's experiencing same-sex attractions, I would say almost the exact opposite. Someone who is experiencing those attractions um, is has experienced a lot of rejection, a lot of self-rejection in some ways, and the last thing they need to hear is judgmentalism or rejection from their friend. If you're their friend, um, what you need to do is actually what the Pope is calling us to do in Fiducia Supplicans. We need to bless them. We need to say, God loves you deeply. He loves you just the way you are, just like he loves all of us the way we are, but he also loves you in a way that hopes that you're going to change and become better, become more worthy of his love. And in that struggle, in that disparity with God's love, you're no worse than anyone else. It is not some unique, special sin that you've committed that somehow makes you beneath other people. You are just as much loved and blessed by God as anyone else. I like fiducia supplicans. I've heard lots of pushback on it. I think it's um, a very awkward, not very edifying document that kind of is uh, um, unclear and obtuse in some ways. I myself don't think that I could ever bless a same-sex couple that comes up for a blessing because I don't know how I could bless that couple without also blessing to some extent their coupling that makes them a couple, and I can't do that. So I say that as a personal matter. I don't know how I could thread that needle. Maybe someone else can figure that out. The Pope says he can do that. Okay, well, he's the Pope. God bless him. I can't do that. But I do think that the impulse that leads to fiducia supplicans, the idea that somehow we need to bless these persons to let them know that we are not condemning them or judging them, we are not happy that they are feel estranged from the church. I think all of that is really good. That's what we need to communicate in some fashion or form, however we can do it. That you are loved by God, you are blessed by God, and that God who loves and blesses you may at some point um, help you to learn a better way that you can live more fully in his life.
I'd like to go to
Now,
something you said just
I
before. Well, go
okay.
ahead.
Well, I would say then I would go on and say another thing, particularly with families that are struggling with a child that's come out with same-sex attraction, and they say, well, how can we help this child? And what I want to recognize and recommend is that they need to fix themselves. I wouldn't say it just like that, but just between you and me. Um, if a mother, and it's usually the mother that comes and says, "My son is same-sex attracted. What can I do for that young man?" And now notice, I, I've gotten a number of such contacts over the years. I've never been contacted by a father. It's always a mother. So
Mm.
we have this too close mother, this hovering mother. And in some way, a young man develops same-sex attraction because his parents are living out their relationship through him in different ways that are not healthy. And so what should be done, if you can get them to do that, is to get the mother and the father to get help, either therapy or counseling, or to understand, to learn about what's going on in their dynamics that's being played out in the life of their son, so that they can learn to love him in healthier ways, so that that father can draw closer to the son and can help him to learn non-sexualized ways of being a man, and of having friendship and relationship with other men. And the mother can back off and allow the child, that young man, more freedom to express himself uh, as a man in that. Now, that would be much healthier than trying to do something within that that boy. And some of the best books on this now would be Brian Chen's book. He has one that's called The Unaffirmed Core, and another one called Reaffirming the Core, where he talks about teaching families. And he also, religious congregations can be surrogate families for these folks, um, to help to restore the dynamics that were not there for that person. And now and so part of that understanding assures the person who's feeling same-sex attraction that it's not something ontologically wrong with them. It's not that they're broken or that somehow they're beneath other people, but there are some things that they didn't receive that they should have gotten, but they didn't get, when they were growing up. And so there's some deficiencies in the way that they were loved, whether the deficiencies were objectively missing or they just didn't subjectively appropriate them in the right way. It doesn't matter. It's like someone who has a debility in some way, who's missing some mineral or vitamin, and they need
Right.
that. And
Right.
if you supply that, it's amazing how often people can work through the same-sex attraction. It's clearest when there's been abuse. Now, sexual abuse or
Yeah.
physical abuse can often be a precipitant of someone feeling same-sex attraction as well as other things. But it often happens that when you deal with the trauma, when you help them to relate to the trauma, to forgive the offender, to rediscover their own dignity and worth and assertiveness in that, that the same-sex attractions sort of dissipate and
Which
diminish.
is
And so what you're dealing with is, I don't want to say it's entirely symptomatic, but it's expressive of a wider network of difficulties in the family. That if you can get that family to come together and you get mother and father to love each other in healthier ways, then
hmm
that health gets expressed in changed life in the
for the
child.
children.
Yes.
That is so powerful. So before we get going, because we have to close up soon. So I've always known about the lesbians on the daddy wound, but from what I'm hearing you say, and I wonder if there's if there's a name for this correlation, the men that struggle with same-sex attraction have, I guess we don't want to call it a mommy wound, but an
Mhm. Mhm.
over involved mom or something. Is that a statistical number we can get too? Like what percent of men that struggle with same-sex attraction have an overly involved helicopter mom, disproportionate relationship with the mom than the dad? I mean,
Uh,
can you say that in a smart way?
yeah, there's not been a study of the percentage of
Or
that,
you
but
need
I
to
can
do
tell
it?
you that I'm working on it. Thanks.
You're
If you
welcome.
know any funding out there,
Got it.
um, um, but I can tell you that every single man who's same-sex attracted that I have met and dealt with fits that pattern.
Wow.
Um, and in the books that I mentioned earlier by Joseph Nicolosi Sr. and by Richard Cohen, um, virtually all of the case studies and the persons they report uh, follow that pattern as well. I wouldn't want to say it's 100%, but it's certainly the vast majority. Um, Now we're talking about clinical samples, and you know the difficulty with that. There may be several etiologies for same-sex attraction. There may be different kinds of homosexualities that people develop, but the main kind that's dealt with through therapy is of this psychodynamic imbalance in the affections of the parents, in the closeness and the distance of the parents, um, and that is amenable to being helped through therapy, especially if the family is able to draw around the son and to help facilitate that. Um, and so I don't know what the particular number would be, but it's a very high number. It's not 100%, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was above 90%.
Yeah. Well, or at least commensurate with the 87%
That's
that we
right.
found with the lesbians and the daddy
Yes.
wound.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. What amazing stuff, Father. God has truly put you in the right place in terms of you're putting your charisms and your skill sets together, the priesthood, marriage, research, and just in a community that so desperately needs truth. And I
Yeah.
think God is raising up truth speakers to just say, look, you tell the truth, I'll take care of the consequences.
Yeah.
So that is excellent. So then one more thing in a succinct way, name one thing you'd have our viewers do differently as a result of something they heard today.
Uh,
I
there,
know you gave us a lot.
um, wow, I'm drawing a blank on that. Uh, I, I, Yeah, I don't know, Christine. That's a good question. I would have to think about that.
So we
Sorry, I
can
didn't.
go with what you said just beforehand.
Yeah.
If you are
Right.
the person who's struggling with it yourself,
Mhm, mhm.
um, listen to what you said there. If you're the parent or family member, do as you
Yeah,
said there. I guess that's
yeah,
kind of like better than the one thing.
yeah. That's a great question. Yeah, I have trouble when someone says, "Well, what's your favorite this?" I go, "Well, I like three or four, but I don't know what my favorite one would be."
Yeah.
I have
Yeah.
trouble settling on one,
That's okay.
except my wife. My wife is the most
Your
wonderful
number
woman.
one female. Got it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, God bless the work you're doing, and thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for doing this. Where can people find you? I know you said something. Should I direct them to the Ruth Institute or so what is that again? How can I find you there? Just go
It's
to www dot.
ruthinstitute.org, and they have great resource pages on my work and on the issues of same-sex attraction and freedom through therapy, as well as other issues of the sexual revolution, and refuting the myths of gender ideology across the board.
Yeah. Not only myths, but lies. Both exist.
Okay, yeah,
Yeah. Well, because we know
right.
those that intentionally want the lie out there, but
That's right.
we will fight it because truth always wins
Truth
eventually.
always wins.
Ah,
Absolutely.
well,
Yeah.
thank you, Father Paul Sullins. As we're having below the show notes here, those articles he talked about, the books, so that you can click on them, try to get the help that you need. But, if all of this seems so overwhelming, just keep your eyes fixed on Jesus and say, Lord, help me understand which part of this should I focus on? Who can I share this with? And that being said, like and share this show. It is not being done anymore through the algorithms because they were trying to stifle us, shut us down, silence us. So manually send this show to someone you think it could help, even if you're not sure. And like and subscribe to my Instagram, Facebook, Rumble, and go to my website, YouTube, of course, as well. Go to my website, breakfastwithbacon.com. Sign up for the newsletter because there will come a time when we're all so silenced that you won't hear from us anymore, and you will have to actively have gone to us or, expect us to send you the newsletters and things. It's happening already, and don't be caught unaware. So anyway, I think that's enough. Father, I forgot to tell you how I end my show, but you're on a show like a long time ago. So let's see if you remember. Um, I'm Dr. Christine Bacon. Thanks for watching Breakfast with Bacon. And I want to remind you always to live your life sunny side up. Do you remember that?
Yeah, now I do. Yes.
Okay, sunny side up.
Sunny side up. Great. That's cute. I like that.